Today, we will break down the philosophical conflict of the film The Favorite, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. By philosophical conflict, I mean the two opposing belief systems within the film that propel our characters into action against one another, and the arguments within the film that make up the moral, ethical, or philosophical argument presented by the artist to the audience by the end of the film. Together, we'll explore each of the main characters and show their relation to said philosophical conflict, so you can understand the relevance of each character. To top off the video, I'll show you how we would create a new character within this universe, because by understanding the philosophical conflict, we will have the necessary criteria by which we can create new characters that make sense within this story. Let's get right into things. First, let's dive into the film and set the stage to define its philosophical conflict. It's early in the 18th century, and the political stakes in the court of England are at an all-time high. The pressure of having to make decisions in this court weighs on the ever-insecure Queen Anne because of her weak will, anxiety, and sickliness. When the movie begins, she is aided by her servant Lady Sarah, who has her own goals in the political race, but the status quo is quickly thrown into turmoil when a new servant arrives and wins the favor of Queen Anne. The philosophical core of The Favorite centers around how Queen Anne wishes she could forget about these political worries and live a happy life. Some figures in the film encourage this temperament, while others fight against it and try to get Anne to better herself. The viewer is immediately introduced to an emotional bias. This bias depicts Lady Sarah as a hard-edged abuser who manipulates Queen Anne into doing her bidding in court. Because of this, we naturally root for the up-and-coming servant, Abigail, who is the kind-hearted underdog that tries to genuinely look out for Queen Anne and ease her load. Essentially, the presentation forces our presupposition about the characters to be that Lady Sarah is the bad guy and Abigail is the good guy. As with any well-written film though, each of these arguments unravels to be unbiased from the writer's perspective, so things get a lot more interesting as we proceed. Let's break down the beliefs of each character and see where they sit on this philosophical conflict. I'll describe the conflict in this film as strict morality versus careless happiness. Let's first examine the character Lady Sarah. Lady Sarah has been a close friend and advisor to the Queen for years. The best interests of Anne are at her heart, but she is very strict with her about it too. To Lady Sarah, the responsibility of being Queen has to outweigh the emotional baggage that it may carry with it. While she does push an agenda of sorts onto the Queen, she makes sure that this is based on a mutual understanding of the importance of her decisions, and she wishes for Anne to contribute. She takes the responsibility of the Queen very seriously and wishes the Queen would care half as much as she did. She does not pressure Anne, abuse her, or manipulate her for a selfish cause, but she is the ultimate encapsulation of this strict morality. So we will place her here at the far end. Moving to our second character, let's look at this guy named Harley. He is an influencer snowballing with power who is moving up the ranks in the court of England. He shares the priority of political decisions with Lady Sarah, but the trick here is that he simply disagrees with her on what the correct action should be. While Harley and Sarah will fight one another throughout the course of the film, they ultimately side on the same side of the philosophical conflict, because this conflict is ultimately not about what is right for the country, but rather caring about the country in the first place, putting it before yourself. We'll put him over here with Lady Sarah. His character exists to show how forcefully Anne can feel yanked between opinions and parties. Next, let's examine the Queen herself. To fully understand where Anne is caught, we have to know who Abigail is, but I want to save her for last. Essentially, Anne is a weak person who wishes for an escape from the pressure of being the final say on these weighty matters in court. The only reason that she gives them the thought and attention that she does now is because her closest friend at the start of the film, Lady Sarah, constantly encourages her in matters and forces her to address them. This all changes when Abigail makes her moves though. We will place Anne directly in the middle of this tug of war and circle back to her. The final character we will be examining, Abigail. We initially assess her to possess a kind heart that cares for the well-being and comfort of the Queen, which seems to be a noble and worthwhile cause, especially under the light of Lady Sarah's harsh dominance over her. What we realize over the course of the film, though, is that it's all an angle she's playing to help her return to a position of aristocracy she once held. Abigail cares only about her temporary and material comfort. She does not care for the political bidding of the court because she is under a warped perception that this does not affect her. we're going to place Abigail at the far end the other direction. The story is a cruel one that positions you to instinctively favor Abigail and disapprove of Sarah, but we will eventually realize what love really is, and we'll see that Abigail's care for the queen doesn't venture much past her own well-being. True love isn't such a soft thing after all. To truly love someone, to truly help someone, is to better them. Lady Sarah does confess that she should have been more gentle so as to not lose Anne, but she holds her moral ambitions and knows that England will be lost under the control of a figure such as Abigail. I won't spoil where the characters land or how the film resolves, but I highly recommend it because it's a remarkable film and the ending is an incredible execution of the philosophical conflict. The clarity in this film is why it's one of my preferred examples for teaching writing. There's nothing confusing or complicated about this philosophical conflict, and thus it is very straightforward to see why and how these characters all relate very strongly to that core. When writing, we want all of our characters to spawn out of their relation to one of these sides of the philosophical conflict. We don't want to just think about it in a binary sense of our character being a pure encapsulation of one side or the other though. They can represent one of the sides of the conflict to varying degrees. For instance, if we try to create an original character within this universe, we could create a negative version of strict morality. We could position this character as Lady Sarah's father, for instance, who could be an individual who religiously enforces his codes of conduct in totally unreasonable, abusive, and horrible ways. Even his daughter disagreeing with him on a political matter could be enough to make him beat her. It's an unproductive form of strict morality, and it would never improve anyone, and it could justify the harsh edges of Lady Sarah if she grew up around that. I would argue that Lady Sarah is the positive form of strict morality though, because even though she does have rough edges, she's using this strict morality to better herself, to better Queen Anne, and to better the country. Alternatively, just for kicks and giggles, we could create a character who is genuinely selfless, like we first assumed Abigail to be. We would have to quickly see this poor servant be trampled alive amongst her peers because she wouldn't have the same ambition as the others. There's a lot more to discuss when considering positives and negatives to each side of the philosophical conflict, and that's exactly what my next video will be on. Stay tuned because I'll be using David Fincher's Seven to break it down. For now, I hope that you've learned something valuable or that you'll at least check out the masterpiece that is The Favorite. Thanks for watching this episode, guys. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, consider leaving it a like and subscribing. It would really help me out. If you thought it could have been better though, first give it a thumbs down and then please leave me some constructive criticisms in the comments below so that I know to do better next time. Thanks guys, I'll see you later.